Hello and welcome to Shoot the Hostage with me, Dan, and my partner, Sarah. We're a movie podcast who talks about a different film each week based on a theme. We do swear and we do spoil the featured movie, so only ever listen if you've seen the film or you don't care too much about spoilers. If you're a regular listener, you can just skip forward until you hear the intro music because you've heard all of this before. But if you are new to the show and you do enjoy what you hear, there are a couple of things you can do to help support the show. Firstly, make sure that you're subscribed on your podcast player so you get notified when new shows drop on Mondays. You could rate us 5 stars on Spotify, which couldn't be easier. You just hit the star icon below the show's artwork. Or if you have a spare few minutes, we'd love it if you could submit a review wherever you listen. Make sure you come follow us at STH_pod on social media. We are active on Instagram, X, Threads, and TikTok. And lastly, the biggest thing you can do to help is tell a friend about the show. So that's about it. That's enough preamble from me. Over to me and Sarah for this week's episode. So we are continuing my season of films about dreams for our penultimate episode of the season, 7 of 8. Many refer to this film as the holy grail of films about dreams.
Sure.
It certainly might be the highest grossing, which we'll touch on a little bit later on. But if you were a human being on a planet Earth in 2010, chances are that you saw Inception.
I didn't.
Unless you're Sarah. And for some reason, a person that sees everything at the cinema didn't go to see the thing that everybody went to see. That's so unlike you.
It's not when you consider my oppositional defiance.
Yeah.
If everybody tells me it's really, really good, I tend to wait a while.
Yeah.
I'll see it on my terms, thanks.
Oh, I'm well aware of your disagreeable nature. But Inception, so it's Christopher Nolan's 4th highest grossing movie of all time at time of recording.
4th highest grossing?
4th highest.
Behind what?
Surprises you? You thought it'd be higher?
I did, yeah.
So what do you think's at number 1, if you had to guess, out of...
Mr. Batman?
It is a Batman.
Which Batman?
Have a guess.
The Dark Knight?
No.
The Dark Knight Rises?
Yes. Yeah, it was the end of the trilogy. That one made $1.11 billion.
That's so much money.
It's a lot of money.
That's higher than I can count by a long shot.
You could count to $1 billion.
No, I couldn't, because I'd get bored at like 15.
True, okay. But if you had the time. Number 2 spot is The Dark Knight, which made just over $1 billion. Number 3, movie that came out last year, Oppenheimer.
Of course.
953 million. That Oppenheimer made more money than Inception, which I knew Oppenheimer did well, right? Obviously, we made that joke that even when it played for 3 months at our local cinema, a couple of months later, they
came back
trailer again.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, what's this movie? I hadn't heard of this movie, and I did that joke about 4 times.
Yeah, don't I know it?
And it's, yeah, you're welcome. And I don't know, it's just how much, I'm not going to get into Oppenheimer, the movie, so much. I didn't love it, but I really respect it for what it did.
It was a technical accomplishment, but I didn't enjoy the film.
Yeah.
Which is how I feel about a lot of Nolan's work.
That's fair. Maybe that one for me is the peak of that kind of sentiment.
But like on paper, what a hard sell.
Yeah. I think with Oppenheimer, Nolan had made Tenet with Warner Brothers, which came out during a pandemic, and that made $375 million during the pandemic.
Wow.
Which is insane to me.
Yeah. Nobody was going to the cinema back then.
Nobody was going to the cinema. And to be fair, I think maybe if you were going to the cinema in, say, July 2020, and the chances are they're only showing Tenet.
That's
so you
true.
Probably didn't have much choice there. So there's a few factors to consider. But I think Warner Brothers put that out during the pandemic, and it was kind of slated as this kind of return to cinema and thing that's going to save cinema, which people were spoken about at nauseum. And and that was the last film that he made with Warner Brothers. So when he left Warner Brothers, he pitched to Universal, I want to make an R-rated movie about Robert Oppenheimer. And of course, if you're in the movie business and Nolan wants you to make a film, you make Nolan's film.
Well, this is it. Like, I say it's a hard sell, not for Nolan.
No.
Obviously, because he's proved himself time and time again. Nobody's going to say no to him, like you just said. But I feel like pitching Oppenheimer as like a tentpole summer blockbuster a couple of years ago would have sounded insane.
Yeah. Totally agree. The fact that it's got Nolan, and obviously something else that's been spoken about to death is the Barbenheimer situation.
Yeah.
Both of those films were helped by each other in this weird kind of entangled marketing scheme. That was genius, really.
That moment in cultural history is going to be studied years from now.
I think you might be right, you know.
Genuinely.
I think you might be right. But just like you say, on paper, you think, really? I was surprised, you know, Oppenheimer is not a mainstream movie in terms of, you're certainly not going there to see superheroes punch each other in the face. It's a sit down, listen to it, pay attention and consider it all.
I feel that way about all of Nolan's films that I've seen, though.
I think Oppenheimer is his least accessible movie, for me.
Yeah, probably. Of the ones that I've seen, anyway.
That's the one where I feel like, oh, I've got to do homework for this. Everything else I can understand pretty much on
Tenet?
first viewing, apart from Tenet. I don't get Tenet.
I don't think Christopher Nolan understands Tenet.
Oh, I mean, we could do, maybe one day we'll do an episode on Tenet. I don't know, but we rewatched that, interestingly, actually, because...
Well, you've been forcing me to fill a few Nolan gaps.
Yeah,
in the past few weeks, in the run up to this.
What did we watch? Prestige.
The Prestige and Tenet, and then this, yeah.
I just thought it would be interesting to speak about how he uses time within his movies. Again, we'll speak about some Nolanisms later on.
Yeah.
But I thought it would be nice to, like you say, plug a couple of holes. And Tenet is one that I don't get. I think it, again, what you said earlier, technically masterful. That movie looks insanely beautiful. Hoyte van Hoytema replacing Wally Pfister as Nolan's cinematography guy. Man, we've spoken about his cinematography before when we covered Nope.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think it looks incredible. And the set pieces are insane and I respect it so much. Don't know what the fuck's going on.
I understood most of it. And I even picked up on a few things that surprised me. But I think if you really, really, really try and break it down, it's a film that doesn't always play by its own rules, doesn't always respect the logic that it's built for itself.
Yeah.
But I had a lot of fun with it, you know.
I
was expecting to not love it because I'm not a Nolan person, really. But I had a lot of fun with that one.
Good. I mean, I kind of probably had a little bit more fun with it second time around, knowing what it is. But I think my experiences were similar in that for the first hour and a half, I was like, wow, what an insane concept. And then the third act happens and I'm like, so they're sucking bullets out of them. And then the rocket launcher, the rocket gets sucked back and the building goes up and down. And how many versions of Aaron Taylor Johnson are there? And like, again, similar to Oppenheimer, like I feel like I've really got to think about it. And I don't always want that.
Yeah.
And it just confused me a bit. But
I mean, look, if you said to me, would you rather rewatch Inception or Return of the Living Dead, Rave to the Grave?
Yeah.
You know what my answer would be.
Rave to the Grave.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's not a question of the quality of the media. It's just a question of personal taste and the fact that I have none.
But that's what we're here to do. We are here to give our opinion and talk about obviously the things that happen with production of the movie and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, we've got to be honest with our opinion.
It's opinion based.
Yeah, totally.
I'm okay with having the wrong opinion. Like, that's fine.
But it's not wrong though, is it? That's the thing. And I think things can change as well. For the longest time, I was probably one of those Nolan fanboys.
Yeah.
And,
well, you're a big Dark Knight guy.
Yeah, I would say probably from Memento. I saw Memento when it came out and was like, wow, that absolutely blew me away. What a fantastic movie. Didn't fully get it, and I've watched it quite a few times since then, and yeah, it makes complete sense. And I would say maybe is one of his most successful movies narratively, I would say. But from then, Batman Begins, Dark Knight, Prestige, Interstellar, Dark Knight Rises, I love all of them. And then after Dark Knight Rises, Interstellar rather, Dunkirk, Tenet,
Oppenheimer, I'm
I'm sort of becoming less of a fan. But but not. It's interesting because now I'm going back and watching some of his other movies as well, like Prestige, and I didn't enjoy that as much as I used to enjoy it. And I thought it was a good movie, but it just something doesn't quite fit. But a thing that will probably become consistent throughout this review, I really respect the filmmaking and the craft, and there's just something missing in terms of story or character or something, I think.
Yeah, I think for me, it's definitely a personal problem in that I don't necessarily want to watch a film every time that's centering a straight white man.
Yeah, that's fair.
Which is not a criticism of Christopher Nolan. I mean, the advice tends to be write what you know, and that's fine. But just personally, it's not necessarily for me. I get a bit bored of it.
Yeah.
I especially like watching The Prestige with you a few weeks ago. The whole thing, I was just like, men are pathetic.
Yeah. But
it's like, oh God, is this unveiling some deep hidden misandry in me? Like, just go to therapy, my dudes.
But I mean, that's one of those where it's very, I'd say that film really wears its heart on its sleeve. It's pretty obvious that the main characters, and we're not here to spoil those movies, but those main characters are idiotic in their obsession. It's like, mate, come on, you've got some dough now, mate. Go and chill out. So Inception then. So we're here to actually talk about Inception, believe it or not Christopher Nolan as a whole. So Inception, it's an idea that he had bouncing around in his head for the longest time. I think he wrote an 80-page version around 2002.
Yeah.
I think just after maybe Insomnia.
I did read Insomnia is one I haven't seen, actually. I know that wasn't quite as well received.
No, that's decent.
Is it?
I would recommend you watch that,
Okay. Yeah, I'm starting to think maybe his earlier stuff is more my speed.
Maybe.
But yeah, I read also that he anticipated it being a quicker job than it ended up being, and that I think it took almost 8 years to complete.
Yeah, so he was inspired. I think he was always interested in the dream logic and that sort of thing, and wanted to make a film based around that. And when he wrote this 80-page script, I believe maybe they had the working title of Dream Stealers, something like that. And he was inspired by films that we've spoken about this very season, funnily enough.
Okay.
The Matrix, Dark City, The 13th Floor.
Interesting.
Funnily enough, the TV show Freddy's Nightmares.
Really?
I've heard him cite that as a reference point. Yeah, something that he enjoyed, I guess, when he was younger and made him think about dreams in a certain way. And I would say for me, it's probably the Nightmare on Elm Street movies is where I first kind of noticed the use of dreams in movies, certainly, because I was way too young when I saw one of those movies in the franchise, which we may talk about. Yeah, so he had the idea years and years and years before it actually got made. It was like 10 years or so. But I think he felt that it was too large of a project to take on, given that in dreams you can do anything you want. He thought maybe, I should hone my craft a bit more. And do you know what? I'm going to take it easy and make a Batman movie. No one cares about Batman, do they?
Oh, yeah. No, there isn't a huge fan base for that property.
I suppose at that point, though, they're coming off the back of Batman and Robin. It's like, well, you could do a shit on the floor.
That's true.
And that'd be more entertaining than Batman and Robin.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, I can understand that perspective. I think maybe that notion is why some of the other films we've covered this season were a little bit hamstrung, because they didn't have the budgets to fulfill the anything goes dreamscape kind of a world. So maybe that was a good call on his part. Yeah,
I think 100% is the right call. And that's what I've read. It could be a bit of studio going, really? You've just made Insomnia, which did fine.
Yeah.
We're not going to give you 200 million for Inception. Not yet. But so it was probably a bit of both, really. But he had an 80-page treatment, and it developed over the 10 years. But he didn't really start taking it seriously until after The Dark Knight had come out, and then spent 6 months refining that script, and Warner Brothers bought it off him as a spec script. And then they started... it was his first solo writing credit as well, actually.
Right, okay.
Which might be something that I can see, like, in terms of... I think I really enjoy his ideas, and I think he's got such an interesting brain. But maybe it might be a kind of a Zack Snyder situation where I think maybe you need... I think I much prefer Christopher Nolan's movies to Snyder's as a whole. There are some outliers. But I do think maybe they're one of those that need some writers to just do some other stuff. I don't know how writers do
Bring
it.
them back down to earth a little bit.
Yeah, maybe. So the budget obviously for this was absolutely insane, and it was given 160 million to make it. Some places say 200 million, so somewhere between 160 to 200 million.
I wonder how much of that was on the cast.
Oh, well, most of it was probably Russell Sprout phase, but the Leonardo DiCaprio, if you haven't watched Lee and Herring in the 1990s.
That's a very niche joke.
Yeah. But I can. The thing is, I can see the budget on screen in this.
Yeah.
It was shot in 6 different countries:
Mm-hmm.
Morocco, France, Japan, Canada, UK, USA. It started shooting on the 19th of June 2009, and it began in Tokyo with the scene where Cobb is being recruited by Saito on the helicopter.
Mm-hmm.
And then it moved to the UK, where the art department built the Tilton Hotel bar set.
Oh, yeah, I read about that.
Yeah. Interesting way to make a movie. Like, I would love to be an extra on set that day.
Yeah.
And they also built the hotel corridor in the UK as well, which ended up being 100 feet and rotated 360 degrees.
Okay, I assumed that's how they achieved that.
Yeah. Joseph Gordon-Levitt spent weeks training, doing 6 days a week for a few weeks to train in that corridor and do the fighting sequences.
That's crazy. I did read that he did all but one of his own stunts.
Oh, okay.
Which I did not have JGL stunt master on my bingo card.
No.
I love him. I think he's great.
I fucking love him. I think he seems like a brilliant guy. The few times that I've heard him on interviews, he doesn't do much. He seems quite a private guy, but seems really grounded, really down to earth.
But that's why I like actors like that. That I want to know as little about them in their personal lives as possible.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So it doesn't colour my opinion of them.
Yeah. And I liked him in this. I mean, I've heard people say I was a bit... he seems a bit stunted. The Blank Check podcast referred to him as a series of right angles in this movie because he stands the straightest that anyone has ever stood in their life. And it made me laugh, and they're right, but I like it. I enjoy the performance. I enjoy that character. And
I think that was absolutely intentional, because I also read that when he turned up for the interview, he turned up in a full suit because he was just like, I think this is what the character would do. And he was right. It was almost identical to the costuming they put him in.
Right. Okay. I mean, he's so sharply dressed.
Yes.
And actually the costumes in general, I really enjoy. Probably Tom Hardy's attire and his whole vibe, really, more than anything in this movie, is maybe my favorite thing about this, or one of my favorite things.
I think he was necessary because he punctured a lot of really sort of severe scenes.
Yeah.
Severe is maybe the wrong word, but it's a very, very
intense.
Serious movie.
Yeah, it does take itself very seriously, and it can get very intense, and you need that. And it doesn't take its foot off the gas in the final act as well, the final 3 acts of the movie. So yeah, that character is really a nice way to puncture those scenes, as you say. But we'll get to that. Sticking in the UK then, so they shot also at University College London for some of the internal college scenes where Michael Caine was telling people about architecture.
Right. Okay.
But interestingly, the exterior college scenes were filmed in France, where the production moved to next.
Oh, that happens a lot though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like they use different exterior and interior. I guess the layout doesn't always work for what they've got planned or something, or... Yeah,
it's probably like people, they go out and do recce's and scout for locations, and they might go, this is exactly what we want for the look of it outside, but the inside doesn't really work. There's not much room.
Looks like a piece of shit.
Yeah. Or we just can't get access. Like you say, it could be a logistical thing. It could be an artistic thing where they want the internal to look a bit different in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's a good thing to do, though, because if you shoot the outside of somewhere and the inside of somewhere, people that know that location can still be disconnected from it in a way. You know, if I see places in London, it does take me out of it a little bit. I'm like, oh, I know that road. If you turn left down there and the car turns right, it turns left, and you're like, that's not what that
yeah.
is. But yeah, and they also shot at a bistro for that scene with Ariadne in France, and the pronunciation here, the Bir Hakeim Bridge, which is where they did the mirror scene, the infinity mirror scene.
Yeah.
Now, going back to the bistro, French authorities would not allow explosions for that scene. So
that's fair.
And that's fair. I mean,
Yeah.
I agree. If you can do it another way without explosives, well, maybe let's do that.
Yeah.
Same with guns.
Yeah.
The special effects department, they used high pressure nitrogen and used high speed cameras to capture, like, to really, you notice the frame rate, and it's probably one of the earliest examples of that I can think of on the big screen. They used sort of various techniques to capture that. They then moved on to Tangier, Morocco, which was used for the Mombasa scenes where Cobb meets Eames and Yusuf.
Oh, yeah.
And then they moved on to Los Angeles, America, and they shot some stuff on a Warner Brothers soundstage, more specifically where Saito's Dream Castle, where they constructed that set there.
Mm-hmm.
And I like saying Saito's Dream Castle. Name for an album?
Sure, yeah.
Or a porn name?
I don't love it for a porn name, no.
Ken Watanabe would never.
He's far too classy.
And the exterior shots of the Limbo Castle stuff was actually shot on Malibu Beach in LA as well.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
The first level of the dream sequence with the van and car chases, that was in Los Angeles, and the van drives off of a bridge called Schulheim Bridge. I think I've got that right.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, Cobb's house was shot in Pasadena.
Okay.
So the final location, towards the end of the shoot, end of principal photography, they ended up in Canada, Calgary, for the really white, snowy stuff.
Yeah, I would have predicted that was the Canadian bit.
Yeah, you have to shoot in Canada, don't you? If it's snow, you have to.
Yeah, it's the law.
Yeah. And when they're on a recce, the scouting people, they found a closed ski resort called Fortress Mountain.
Wow.
Which, for some reason, I'm thinking that Christopher Lambert runs that. Christophe Lambert, I beg your pardon.
I would watch Fortress Mountain, not going to lie.
Yeah.
Show me that movie.
That's a sequel to Fortress.
Yeah.
Let's forget the one in space. Let's do a situation where we forget the sequel and we just do a sequel to the original. Bring back Stuart Gordon.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Oh.
So Calgary, Alberta, so they built the set on the side of a mountain, which took 3 months to build.
Bloody hell.
And there's your budget.
Yeah.
I work in the film industry and I see construction budgets, and some things are really minimal and you do a lot of stuff on location, and some things are astronomical and huge. And I've done probably not quite Nolan levels, but I've done both ends of that spectrum. But I really don't know what the construction budget would have been for that, particularly that set in Canada. You've got to get all of the crew up to the mountain for a start.
Yep.
Then all of the equipment, then all of the materials.
The insurance alone.
Is insanity.
I'm kind of amazed he got it done for that little. I know that sounds like a ridiculous thing to say, and I know it's 15 years ago now, but yeah, that's quite impressive what they accomplished.
It really is, and like you say, it's a lot of money. When you think about $200 million, that is a lot of money.
Yeah, and you consider that it was shot on film and all these other expenses as well that you don't have when you're dealing with digital.
Yeah.
Like that's yeah.
But you look at films that are mostly VFX these days, and I'm looking at you, Marvel, where they don't look great.
No.
And they cost 250 million.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, how? Why? Like, that is not a good use of resources. One of the earliest things that I learned when I was doing my film accountancy course was that the budget needs to be on screen. Like, it can be a high budget, it can be a low budget, but the budget needs to be on screen. That is the most important thing. And it's obvious when you think about it, but not something I'd considered until someone told me to consider it.
Maybe somebody should have informed Eli Roth before he wasted all that money on Borderlands.
Someone should inform Eli Roth to stop making movies.
Well, yeah, that too, ideally.
Yeah. So I think Nolan had always wanted to do some kind of snowy scene, some kind of ski scene.
Was this inspired by a James Bond movie?
It was inspired by a Jimmy Bond movie.
Jimmy!
Yeah, on Her Majesty's Secret Service, which I have not seen.
It will not surprise you to learn that I also have not seen that.
No, I haven't seen a bunch of those. Maybe I have when I was like 5, but I don't know. I remember James Bond movies always being on telly at 3 p.m. on a Saturday afternoon.
Yeah.
And I was sort of vaguely interested. Oh, it's the bit where Roger Moore dances on crocodiles or something. But like, I was never...
some sexism.
Yeah. But it wasn't sexism then, Sarah. It was just cool.
That's true.
Yes. I'm never the biggest fan of Bond movies, but there's a couple that I really enjoy, but not the earlier ones. And but yeah, I think he's always wanted to make a Bond movie, so you can see a lot of that DNA in this. The sharp dressed protagonist, the stunts, the kind of the action vibe of it as well.
Well, I've seen a few people refer to this as a heist movie of sorts, and it both is and isn't. Yeah. I get it, because structurally it absolutely is.
I think it's a heist movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would put this in a heist season, and in fact, I have, because I completely forgot. But when I was doing my research, I remembered I've covered this before.
Oh right.
With Albert, we did a heist double bill.
What was it paired with?
Oh, now you're asking. I think I think my choice was Inception, and Albert's choice, I think, was a Jason Statham movie called The Bank Job. And that tells you everything you need to know about our dynamic there. Yes. But I think most of that episode, if I recall, was me explaining the plot to Albert.
Right.
And him going, yeah, but shoot your gun time at the end. And it was fun. So casting wise then, so we've already mentioned it's got Leonardo DiCaprio and Joseph Gordon-Levitt, but did you know that Brad Pitt and Will Smith were offered the role of Dom?
I didn't.
Yeah. Well, apparently Brad Pitt didn't get back to Christopher Nolan within the allotted 48 hours requested. And Will Smith was on an acting break. Okay. Which...
2010.
Yeah. Apparently between 2008 and 2012, he was on a break to spend more time with his family. Okay. And that worked out well. Sorry.
I'm saying nothing.
It's still jokes. It's just jokes. That doesn't matter. He's never going to listen to this. I know I adore Will Smith, despite... let's not get into that.
No.
Will Smith actually has got a bit of a reputation for turning down really successful characters.
Oh, yeah?
He turned
what
down
else?
Django.
Okay.
Quentin Tarantino. And he turned down Neo for The Matrix. I mean...
That would have been such a different movie.
It would have. And I'm glad that he turned those down, because I think those two movies turned out perfectly with Jamie Foxx and Keanu Reeves. But it's interesting that he's turned down some of the roles of some of my favourite movies.
Yeah.
But then he made Independence Day and he punched that alien in the face. Yeah. And I'm Legend. Yeah. Yeah.
Can't win them all.
Once... apparently Nolan had always wanted DiCaprio, but sent out those kind of invitations to those two just as a backup. Yeah, sure, Nolan, sure.
That's what he told Leonardo DiCaprio.
Course, you have to. You're dealing with egos here. You have to massage them very gently, but not let them know that you're massaging them. But once Leonardo DiCaprio was secured, he and Nolan worked together to develop the emotional centre of the film. There wasn't much of that, apparently, at that point, and Nolan was kind of at a stage where he was sort of pulling his hair out a bit. He couldn't quite crack it. He couldn't quite get the emotional centre of the film. And I think what he did was write it around DiCaprio, and I gather they had conversations about, what makes Dom tick, and they built it around that.
Well, you know how Nolan adds an emotional centre to his films, don't you? Dead wife.
Dead wife.
It's always a dead wife.
Yeah. He was like, Leo, what if you had a dead wife? And Leo's like, I love it. How old is she?
26. No, I'm out.
She's got to be younger. That's the most unbelievable part of this movie.
I joke. I am sick of the dead wife trope, because
agreed.
I think kind of to jump on what I was saying in the first part of the show, I'm a little bit over movies that centre these men who their only kind of propulsion is grief. Yeah. I think it's a bit lazy. I'm not necessarily calling Christopher Nolan lazy.
Far from it.
Yeah. You only have to watch his films to know he's definitely not lazy. And I did read excerpts from an article where he was interviewed, and he gets asked about this a lot, apparently. And his reasoning is that obviously he's married, deeply in love with his wife, and that is kind of his biggest fear manifest. So that's fine. That's completely understandable. That's justified. But do you have to do it every time?
Yeah. And I would agree with that. I totally understand that it's your biggest fear, write what you know, but you want to see something different from filmmakers, and a lot of his, I would say on the one hand, his films couldn't be more different from each other in terms of maybe the not necessarily mechanics, because some of them are quite similar.
The stories are very different.
The stories are very different. To go from a biopic to a film about dreams and a superhero movie and a film about insomnia, which maybe would be a good double bill with Inception.
Yeah, maybe. But broadly speaking, thematically, they're very similar.
Yes.
There's so much overlap.
Yes, and it would be nice to see another motivation for a main character.
Yeah.
And it gets to a point where you're like, again?
Yeah.
Like, even Oppenheimer, it's like, okay, this is sort of based on true events, but again?
Yes, it starts to get a bit weird.
It's been 20 years now. But yeah, maybe that's my biggest issue with these films.
And maybe that's a little bit reductive, but it's hard not to notice that keep cropping up time and time again, and it's hard not to kind of get a bit bored of it. It's samey.
Yeah,
I don't want the same stuff in every movie.
Yeah, agreed.
Like, again, understand that it's your biggest fear, but that's like if I were to start directing films and every film I made featured giant spiders.
Yeah.
People would get real sick of that real quickly.
Every movie that you make would have Greg Grunberg in it, produced by J.J. Abrams.
Are you saying I would just keep making big ass spider again and again?
Yeah.
Yeah, probably.
I think you would, and I think you know it.
Deep down, yeah.
So when DiCaprio was cast, they not only did they structure the emotional part of the script around him, and they kind of worked together to develop that. He also cast the movie around him as well, and cast with his character in mind.
What, like people he thought would compliment him on screen?
Exactly. Yeah. So James Franco was meant to
I
be
read this.
Arthur.
No.
Yeah.
No, James Franco should never be in anything ever again.
Agreed. My favourite role of his is Alien Covenant, which if you've seen that movie, you'll know why.
It breaks my heart because I love so many things that he's been in.
Yes.
I adore Freaks and Geeks, and it's hard to watch now.
Do you know what? Like, let's be honest here. He's an incredible actor. He actually couldn't do Inception because he had there were scheduling conflicts with 127 hours.
Right.
And that is a mind-bogglingly fantastic performance. That is something that I've not quite seen. I've not seen anything like it before. He's fantastic in it.
Yeah, he is an outstanding actor. He's also an outstanding arsehole.
Yes, 100%. And it doesn't always work, and sometimes he's just you can tell he takes things kind of way too seriously.
Oh yeah, like the period of time where he was like, I'm going to be a painter and I'm going to write poetry and I'm going to direct it's like the definition of jack of all trades, master of none. Just pick a lane, man. He's
got a whiff of LaBeouf about him, hasn't
he? Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
To my knowledge, I don't think James Franco's ever yanked out one of his own teeth for a role, though.
Not that you know of.
Not that I know of.
They cut his arm off, though, in that movie.
That's true, yeah.
It's
amazing what they can do with prosthetics these days.
Kate Winslet was offered the role of Mal.
Okay, yeah. She's worked with Leo a couple of times.
Yep, 2 times before that. She turned it down. She couldn't see herself in that role, which is fair.
I like Kate Winslet.
I fucking love Kate Winslet. She seems
great. So cool.
Yeah. And I would like to have seen her in this, to be fair.
Yeah.
Marion Cotillard was very good, though.
She was, yeah.
Ariadne, the character of Ariadne, who was played by Elliot Page.
Yep.
At the time, was using the name Ellen Page, but from this point forward, we'll refer to her as him. Mm-hmm. And if there's any mistakes, I'll correct myself and apologise, and we'll move on.
That's all we can do. Just to avoid confusion, we'll refer to Ariadne as she.
Yep. Okay.
But Elliot Page as he, obviously.
Yep. Okay. So Ariadne originally, few people that were considered was Evan Rachel Wood.
Oh, okay.
Emily,
I like her.
Emily Blunt.
Mm-hmm.
Rachel McAdams.
Yeah.
Kerry Mulligan.
Wow, loads of people.
And Taylor Swift.
No. Are you serious?
That's what I read. I don't know. This was off the internet. This is off a random website. Seemed legit. So maybe not, but I thought it'd be fun to talk about it anyway. Or mention it.
Oh my God. No, thank you.
No.
I'm so far from being a Swiftie.
Yeah, me too. Me too. But Nolan met with Elliot Page and wanted them for the role because they just got on. They just got on really well, and he sort of saw a maturity in the actor. Page had to read the script in a secured, locked room on his own. So why?
Yeah.
Because of security, because it's a Christopher Nolan
they just
movie.
didn't want it
just
leaked
secrecy.
in any way.
Yeah, don't want anything leaked. And that's part of a Nolan movie is, I think it's the event of it.
Right.
They're always built up. Christopher Nolan's next movie. You know, his name's on the poster. It's a Christopher Nolan movie. It's very important. And a lot of that is the secrecy. You don't want to know what it's about. And I think he's a master at controlling the narrative. Maybe he doesn't control all aspects of the marketing, but I'm sure that he's like, I don't want anything given away about this, that, or the other.
In fairness, I think they could have leaked the script for Tenet and people still wouldn't have known.
Yeah. Who read it 10 times ahead of and they're like, right, is this going to make any sense on the screen? I watch it like, no, it doesn't.
I like Elliot Page. I do.
Yeah.
Also, startling number of Oscar nominees and winners in this cast.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this film on its own was nominated for Best Picture.
Yeah, I think it got 4 nominations that year.
It won 4.
Oh, it won 4, right.
It was nominated for more, which I haven't noted, but it won 4 Oscars for cinematography, sound editing, sound mixing, and visual effects.
Okay, the sound...
I would say the score, certainly.
The score... Look, I know you're a big Hans Zimmer person, like...
Who isn't?
Up the Zimmer.
Oh no. I went to see Hans Zimmer in concert in 2000 and I want to say 14, somewhere around that time in London.
So a decade ago. Was that the last time you experienced emotions then? Has it been a decade?
Fuck you. Why are you swiping at me? But yeah, maybe. No, of course not. But he always finishes his sets with the theme from Inception, Time, I think it's called. But yeah, I would say more the sound editing is maybe the score. I think is better. I think the sound's decent in this, but it is a Nolan movie, and sometimes it's hard to hear some of. I always have to watch Nolan movies with closed captions on.
Yeah,
since Inception, I would say.
I think it's not necessarily something I would have noticed had you not pointed it out. And I think it's when we were watching Tenet, which is sort of its own beast because the dialogue is delivered in such a way that it feels like they're just speed running the script. And that was that was a whole thing as well. But yeah, it's hard to pick up on some dialogue for sure.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily love the sound in his movies.
Yeah. Sadly I would agree with you, but the strongest thing sound wise for me definitely was Hans Zimmer, and he was brought onto the project really early. I think he worked with James Newton Howard to do the Dark Knight and Batman Begins scores, and I think this was the first time he'd done a project with Nolan on his own.
Okay.
And he was brought on very early because Nolan refuses to use temp tracks in his films because he doesn't want to be married to a track that he can't get. He wants, you know, if he puts a song in there and he really likes it and they can't get it, he's like, oh, well, now I've got to change. And obviously he doesn't want that. So I feel like it's probably really important, more so because of that, to bring on a composer really early on in the project. And Hans Zimmer brought on Johnny Marr to play a guitar sample.
Oh, yeah, I heard that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So what I didn't know until researching for this episode is Zimmer used the Edith Piaf song, which plays quite a lot in the movie. But
Je ne regrette rien.
No, je ne regrette rien.
Yeah, that's perfect. Perfect.
No, je ne regrette rien. He actually used that track as the basis for the entire score, which I had no idea.
Yes, I read something about this as well. That it's sort of slowed down a lot in places to kind of mimic the slowing down of time, the further down the dream levels that they got.
Yeah.
And that the entire score ended up kind of, well, not the entire score, but it largely ended up being based around that song and like the chord progression.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was the whole of the score in the movie was based off of subdivisions and multiplications of the tempo of the Edith Piaf track, which I read a really interesting article in The Guardian, which I've saved the link, so if I remember I'll put it in the description. But that's fascinating read, and Zimmer is a fucking legend. He seemed great. He's another one that seems great as well, to be honest.
Do you know why they included that song?
No, do you?
Well, the translations are all to do with having no regrets, like getting rid of old memories, the good and the bad. Yeah. So thematically it really ties in as well. Like nothing is not considered so carefully in these movies.
Yeah, and that's part of the fun of these movies is going into his movies
almost like Easter eggs.
Yeah, like Easter eggs, and just it gives you an appreciation. They're not thrown together.
No,
they are meticulously crafted.
Yeah, whether you like them or not.
Whether you like them or not, and you've got to respect that.
Mm-hmm.
Like I saw some reviews, and I've saved a couple, which maybe I'll read just before we get onto our main thoughts on it. But even if you dislike it, you have to recognise the craft.
Yeah.
And it's not just the director. People always like, it's a Christopher Nolan movie. It's like, yeah, okay, well, production designer, cinematographer, composer, producers to a degree who are facilitating a lot of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a collaborative effort. And I think Nolan will probably be the first to admit that. So we've touched on some of the cast, but I don't think I've mentioned that the kid from Witness is in this as well.
Oh, yeah, Lucas Haas.
Yeah.
He's a grown man now, Dan.
It looks weird because he looks the same.
I know.
He's just a bit longer.
He's quite a long man, yeah.
He's a long man. It's the second Lucas Haas movie we've done randomly.
Mars Attacks.
Yeah, he's made 3 movies and we've covered 2 of them.
And one of them's Witness.
Witness. No, he was in Brick with JGL actually as well, which we spoke about the other day.
Love that movie.
Is that Ryan Johnson?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. He drinks milk in that movie.
Yeah,
so,
he does.
Interestingly, did you know that if you take some of the character names and you rearrange them, it spells out the word dreams?
I do. If you use all of the character names, it spells dreams pay.
Dreams pay? What does that mean?
Well, that's how they make their living.
Oh, right.
Or a dream spy.
Dream spy. Dream spy.
A dream spy.
A dream spy. Yeah, okay. Must have been an accident. The dreams thing must have been, I don't know, like a dreams thing I'm guessing was intentional. Dom, Robert, Eames, Ariadne, Mal, Saito. That's the names that I wrote down, and I forgot about Lucas Haas. What's he called? Nash.
Well, there's Peter, there's another A name, and there's Yusuf. Peter. Yusuf is the Y.
Yusuf, right, yeah, of course. And there were 2 A's.
Yeah.
Yeah, so getting into our thoughts, really, and experiences with watching the movie.
It also spells spam ready, I think. I'm just looking at my notes now.
Oh, you're doing anagrams now?
I'm trying to yeah.
Spam ready?
I prefer spam ready, yeah.
All right, is this in the Monty Python universe?
Sure, it is now, yeah. Canon.
So the idea that this is a movie about dreams within dreams.
Mm-hmm.
You watched it for the first time all the way through the other night.
We haven't even talked about that.
Why did you never watch it?
I don't know. I'm not...
Because everyone told you to, as we've established. Oh, you've got to watch Inception. That is annoying.
It is annoying,
People keep telling me to watch Game of Thrones.
Yeah, and you still haven't.
I've watched 3
probably
episodes.
Never will.
I watched 3 episodes.
We watched one at the Action Festival.
I've seen 4 episodes. I did not care for it.
It was great until it wasn't.
I respect the production design. I can't speak about the final season because I don't know anything about the plot.
But yeah, what were we talking about?
You didn't watch Inception.
Oh yeah. I think just because I get so distracted.
Yeah, no shit. You're doing anagrams, and I'm sitting here talking about the movie. You're like, oh, I think it spells spam. Cool.
It definitely spells spam. No, I don't know. The only, like I say, didn't go see it at the cinema. I have definitely seen some of it. I recognised a lot from the first act, and I don't remember the circumstances under which I walked away from it. I can't imagine it's because I was bored, because it's certainly not boring.
Yeah,
but yeah, I don't know.
So the concept of it then, first time watch, it's about dreams within dreams.
Yes,
and it's, if you're not paying attention, you'll get lost. But I feel like if you're paying attention, you'll get it.
Yeah.
And you were fine with it? You had no issues with it? I remember we got to the end of the movie and you went, I forgot they were on the plane. But you knew where they were in the dream.
Yeah.
And the various levels.
I understood the levels, yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like it's...
And there's sort of the loop back to the old Saito kind of thing from the start and stuff. Like,
I've heard people say, oh, it's really confusing. And I don't think it's confusing at all.
As long as you're paying attention, it's fine.
There you go. That's the key, isn't it? You have to actually watch it.
Oh yeah, if you've got it on going on your phone, then yeah, you're going to be absolutely buggered.
Yeah. If you're making pancakes on a treadmill and on your phone playing Total Battle and got it on in the background, then you're not going to take it all in.
Who makes pancakes on a treadmill?
I don't know.
That sounds so dangerous.
But efficient.
Well, assuming you like pancakes and cardio, yeah.
Would be efficient for me because I love both of those things. So, so you followed it fine. I followed it fine. I don't ever feel like I had a problem with the mechanics of the film, and I think it's actually
it's clearly very well thought out.
It's very well thought out, and I think the final act is so the different levels of dreams are so distinctive from one another that it's very easy when they cut to various scenes in levels 1, 2, and 3. We'll call them. You can tell where they are. Yeah, and that is really, really well done. Mm-hmm. What I care less for is the first act, when the first act is explaining everything that's going to happen in the final act. And I think you probably need some of that because, that's probably why the final act works so well, because the dream logic. But I feel like it was over-explained. They repeated themselves quite a lot. There was a lot of exposition, and it's a common complaint against this movie. But I think it's a common complaint for a reason. Like,
I don't know if it's just because it's so fresh in my memory, but I thought Tenet was way guiltier of exposition dumps than this was.
You might be right. However, I feel like in Tenet you may as well have not bothered because it doesn't make any sense anyway. So why are you bothering? Okay. Sometimes things go forward, sometimes things go backwards. Why? Doesn't matter. Future, innit?
Kenneth Branagh's a dick. That's all I know.
He loves boats. But I feel like, in this one, it was over-explained. And it's interesting because on the one hand, I respect it because it's a unique concept for an action blockbuster tentpole movie that's aimed for the entire family, a 4-quadrant movie, I think they call them.
Yep.
To make it as weird and complicated as it is.
It's ambitious as hell.
Ambitious, and I respect it. But I do feel like you could have removed some of that. There's a lot of stuff that I would just take on face value.
Do you think, though? Do you think you could have removed some of the exposition and it would still be a 4-quadrant movie?
I mean, maybe it'd be a 3-quadrant movie.
Yeah.
But if you can aim for 3.5, then that's a compromise that I'd be willing to accept.
Yeah, but the studios want all of it, don't they?
No, this is true. And I think he struggled with that even more so. I believe there was a longer cut out there, and he had to cut out a lot more exposition. So I just think, no, it should have been shaved a bit more. And it's a complaint that I have about long movies often is the runtime, but it's not necessarily the runtime I'm worried about. It's the content of the thing.
That's really interesting because apparently the Edith Piaf song that we've talked about, one of the original recordings was 2 minutes 28 seconds.
Ooh, right, that makes sense.
And obviously the film is 2 hours 28 minutes.
Yep. Okay.
So again, completely intentional.
Yeah, so there must have been bits in there, I'm guessing, going, you know what, if I just doesn't have to be 2:28, I'd whip this scene out, maybe.
Do you reckon?
Maybe.
He was so married to the idea that it had to match.
I don't know. Is that coincidence?
I don't think so, no.
Marion Cotillard played Edith Piaf.
She did. Apparently that is a coincidence.
That one is a coincidence, yeah.
Yeah.
Christ.
La Vie en Rose. I own that, I believe.
Do you?
Yeah.
I haven't seen that.
Good movie.
Oh, interesting. Never heard of it before doing the research for this.
Okay.
So my main complaint with this film, I'll get this out of the way early, is that first hour and over-explaining of the elements of the final act. But also it's some of my favourite imagery. So I'm gathering like he's doing he's explaining stuff at Ariadne, Dom. And
Dom Cobb.
Yeah. He's explaining stuff to Ariadne, and it's all often in these really interesting locations about how dreams work. He's got the Penrose staircase, and you've got the bridge in France that we touched on with the infinity mirrors. Like, it's really interesting imagery, and the bit where the most famous bit maybe, and the bit that's been copied 1,000 times is the folding city. Obviously Doctor Strange did that, and probably others. I don't know. I feel like it's a trope at this point, but I can only think of 2 movies that have done it. But that's some of the most interesting imagery, so I get it. It's just the dialogue I have more of an issue with. Maybe we could have been a little bit more abstract, but, again, 4-quadrant movie, so...
Yeah, I think it's hard for me to say, having only watched it once all the way through. I think you're probably right. They could have been a little bit more economical with the dialogue, but obviously your question to me earlier was, did you understand it all?
Yeah.
And my answer is yes. Had it not been hammered home so much in that first hour, maybe I wouldn't have done. Who knows?
Yeah. I think maybe it could have just been a bit more economical. Like you say, I think for me,
maybe
a
it's
few things.
A repeat watch issue because you're already familiar with the mechanics of everything. Maybe it just feels like repetition to you.
True. Yeah, it could just be. Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. Do you know what? Like, I enjoy that final hour and a half so much that I think maybe the next time that I have an interest in watching this, I might just put on the last hour and a half.
Just watch the first hour at 1.5 speed.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So we've touched a little bit on, or quite a lot on, kind of Nolan's tropes at this point, I guess. The dead wife stuff, which he's included in almost every one of his films. There's something else that I notice about his films. He likes to repeat dialogue over and over again. And I find that to be a bit laborious. I think...
Can you give me any examples? Because I'm not familiar with that trope.
So in this one, in Inception, they repeated the phrase leap of faith. And obviously it's in keeping with the theme of the movie and the letting go of it all and moving on kind of themes that is essentially Dom's character arc. But it just, when people keep repeating it, I kind of am rolling my eyes a little bit. I believe Ken Watanabe said quite a few times, "Let's be young men together."
Oh yeah.
While he had grey hair and a beard, and I was like, "Young men? Like, how old is Leonardo?" I suppose he's a young man in this movie, isn't he?
Younger than he is now.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's how time works.
Time's another one. Time. He's obsessed with time.
What's the perception of time? Yeah, I mean, I didn't notice this until when we watched Prestige a few weeks ago in preparation for this show. But there was a thing that he did where a character's reading a diary, and then he's reading a diary while someone else is about someone else reading his diary. And I was like, that's insane. Like, how do you even do that and pull it off? I've never noticed it before.
Yeah.
Or maybe I did, but it's been so long since I've seen a Prestige. And maybe because I was really thinking about Nolanisms for this. But yeah, Prestige does a little bit of that.
Obviously, things like Interstellar plays with the notion of like time moving differently and, linked to space travel and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, he does some really... It's probably my favourite Nolan movie, I would say. But yeah, that deals with time dilation perfectly, and that's a concept that I've been fascinated with forever. So that uses time really well. Dunkirk, which I believe you haven't seen.
I haven't, no.
I saw it at the cinema, and it didn't work for me 100% for much of the same reasons that a lot of his movies don't work for me now.
I heard a lot of criticisms of like flag waving patriotism, and that put me off a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of par for the course in a war movie, isn't it? Really. But it again, really interesting, fantastically made, beautiful to look at, and the way the story is told is really unique and interesting.
Okay.
And it's very successful in that, but there's no story, really.
Right. I'm open to it. Some of my favourite movies have no story.
True.
Completely plotless.
Yeah, true. Yeah. What was that? Necropolis. What's Return of the Living Dead? Necropolis. That's got no story.
I was more talking about Rave to the Grave, but sure, Necropolis is great too.
Yeah. Time perception. Also, I would say Memento is a really good example of a successful use of that. And you go back and watch that and rewatch that, and maybe it's one of those that gets stronger every time you watch it.
Yeah.
Oppenheimer did a similar thing to, I would say, Dunkirk, and obviously Tenet, which we've spoken about a bunch already. So should we get to, is there anything you want to talk about in terms of the scenes or the what happens in the movie? Because I wanted to ask you a question about the ending of it, but is there anything you want to squeeze in between that?
No, go ahead. Ask me the question.
I mean, there's the obvious question, isn't it? At the end,
the question.
Yeah, the question. Cobb wins the dream competition, and he does the spinny top thing, and he goes and sees his kids.
Yeah.
And the spinny top thing does a little wobble. And a wobble is a fun word to say.
Wobble. Yeah.
Wobble.
Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down.
That's very true. Is that another very English-based
I think so.
joke humour? It wobbles a bit. So my question to you is, do you think he's in reality or is he still in a dream?
Well, according to Christopher Nolan, it's reality.
Okay.
And the key to that visually is the fact that Dom's only ever wearing his wedding ring when it's in a dream. And apparently he's not wearing his wedding band in that final scene, which is the clue as to it being reality.
So it is real. It is I read it that way too, because I feel like it wants to have an optimistic ending.
I want the bleak ending. I came away from that being like, oh, he's dreaming. Yeah. But that says way more about me than it does about the film.
Yeah. I think I would... and more, I would say, in keeping with some of the things we've already discussed this season, 13th Floor, which obviously Nolan cites as one of his inspirations for this movie.
That's crazy.
And we've spoken about it already, and it's a really happy coincidence that that's happened that way. But yeah, and again, maybe not going to spoil that movie in case you haven't seen it. Go and listen to our episode on it. Watch the movie, then listen to our episode on it. But things happen in that movie where you're not sure what is reality and what's not. And but it's using a very different mechanic. And this is very similar. It's got a lot in common with simulation theory, I think.
I don't necessarily love it when directors are like, this is the definitive answer.
You prefer the Lynchian approach?
Well, somewhere in the middle.
What does it mean? I'm not going to fucking
Yeah, somewhere in the middle would be ideal. I don't necessarily want David Lynch level ambiguity.
I don't know.
Yeah. But yeah, I prefer the discourse. I prefer the conjecture.
Yeah, agreed.
It's way more fun.
But again, going back to this being the budget dictates that this movie has to appeal to as many people as possible. Course. And it kind of has to be a more optimistic and straightforward ending. I would say this is probably as ambiguous as you could get in a movie of this kind of level, because it's not
maintaining mass appeal. Yeah, for sure.
Because it does walk that line between being, okay, I think clearly this is an optimistic ending where he's in reality, and obviously Nolan has said that too. But it's interesting to have that discussion. And
yeah,
I think it's a lot clearer than maybe I thought it was on first watch.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe with first time watching it, I was like, oh, he could still be dreaming, but there's quite a lot of clues to let you know. In a similar way to The Dark Knight Rises, actually, how that ends, I would say I have a similar feeling about that ending, but I prefer that ending. But I'm not going to get into that because I'd like to cover that one day.
I'm sure we will.
I think it's underrated, but
that's
another conversation.
Do people not like it?
Not really, no.
Is that the one with Bane?
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
I love it. It's the one that I've watched more. The last 5 years, I've probably seen that more than any of the others.
What do you know about Christopher Nolan as a person?
Almost nothing. Only his early career, making a following. Didn't really study film. Just sort of went off to races trying to make his own stuff, and was a student of film in the same way that we are. We just fucking love watching movies.
Yeah.
But no, that's pretty much it. What have you got?
Well, it's funny because I've read a few kind of testimonials / rumors online that he is a major control freak, and like there's the famous kind of thing. I think it came from Anne Hathaway, maybe. That apparently he doesn't allow chairs on set because he thinks nobody should be sitting. If they've got time to sit, then they should be working.
Oh God, it reminds me of my dad.
Time to lean, you've got time to clean. That kind of attitude.
Yeah.
I don't, like I said, I can't back up the authenticity of that, but it's certainly been repeated in enough different places that I would imagine there's some truth to it.
Yeah.
And yet he continues to work with the same people time and time and time again. Yeah. So he can't be an arsehole. Like, no. I think on the sliding scale, you've got, I don't know, who's a director that everybody loves?
Not Zack Snyder.
I mean, like to work with.
I don't know.
So you've got whoever.
Jim
Cummings on one end of the spectrum and like David O. Russell on the other.
Yeah.
I think Christopher Nolan's got to be closer towards the Jim Cummings end, right? Because why would people just keep continuing to work with him for the prestige of working with Christopher Nolan?
No.
I don't think they would.
I don't think they would. I think it probably depends on the actor.
Yeah.
But I would say probably not. And there is a difference between being very meticulous, very detailed, and being a control freak. it depends, I guess, how that is enforced.
Yeah.
I've heard David Krumholtz, I think it was, maybe it was on WTF, the Maron podcast, or possibly Rosenbaum, when he was talking about being on the set of Oppenheimer, and he needed to do a little fart. He needed a little fart, and because he wanted to move away so he could do a little fart away from set, but Nolan was like, "No, we're blocking. You can't move." And he was like, "Okay, well, I'm just going to do a little fart then." And he did a little fart on set, and it was hilarious. But yeah, it just speaks to the kind of, no, we need to do this job now. And there, like, what my point was, is that I think there is a difference between being really detailed and wanting to make the best thing you possibly can, and
just being
a complete fucking control freak. It's how you do it.
Yeah.
And I've heard people speak very highly of him. He's very nice and very respectful and softly spoken and stuff.
People definitely respect him. And I think what you talked about when Leo came onto this project and Christopher Nolan was sort of open to the collaborative aspect of him working on the script together. Yeah. That definitely doesn't smack of a director who's got a poor reputation.
No, I think he's open to ideas as well. Like, I know that he likes to have a certain level of flexibility when he's shooting to kind of incorporate things that come up, you know, maybe on the day or maybe not on the day, but are things that you consider while making a movie. Things can change. Things present themselves and you're like, oh, that would be good. And you do that thing because it's way better than things on paper. But he's spoken about, he's struggled with, probably not, he's Christopher Nolan, so probably not hugely, but it's difficult to work with studios when they want everything planned to the nth degree.
Yeah.
And I guess that he plans everything to the nth degree as much as he can, but leaves some room for flexibility. And I would hope that some of that is with the actors as well, because I think we've spoken before, you employ some of the actors that you employ, and he employs some of the best in the business. You want them to do their jobs. You want them to have an interpretation of the character and bring something to it. And maybe they say a line, or maybe they don't say a line. Maybe they can do a line with a look rather than the actual dialogue, which is probably my preferred thing quite a lot of the time.
But there's only so much, like you just said, there's only so much you can plan for. And I think a really good example of that recently is, speaking of some of the best actors in the world, is Joaquin Phoenix pulling out of that really high profile project just recently. And there's talk of lawsuits and all sorts.
What's that? I've not heard of this.
Oh, I can't remember the details.
It's not Joker 2, obviously.
No.
Unfortunately.
That's done and dusted. But yeah, he's apparently got a bit of a reputation for that, for wanting to back out of projects.
Yeah, he's an interesting fellow, Joaquin Phoenix. Yeah.
We should cover something with Joaquin Phoenix in. I want to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. Okay, let's think about how we can do that maybe. We've got 8 planned already.
Yeah.
We've got 10 planned randomly, but 9's open. Yeah, we'll come back. Put a pin in that. So, what's your favourite performance in this, or character, or actor's portrayal of a character? Or most important? I think you know mine. We've already spoken briefly
Tom
about
Hardy.
it.
Yeah. Tom Hardy's great.
Oh, I fucking love Tom Hardy, just as a performer.
I'm
sure he's great as a bloke as well. I'm not saying I just like him as a performer.
It's funny because he gets a lot of shit, doesn't he? I think a lot of people really were down on his portrayal of Bane. A lot of people didn't like his Mad Max.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Like, I don't think anybody's talking about the quality of the film, just his performance. They didn't like him as Mad Max.
Was perfect.
I think it was fine. It wasn't his movie.
No.
That's not an issue to me.
No, but I think that's the way he played it.
Yeah.
Randomly,
but
because he knew what he was making when he was making that movie with George Miller.
No.
That was a difficult movie to make.
Yeah, from all accounts. But yeah, I think the first thing I saw him in was a TV miniseries called Stuart: A Life Backwards.
I thought he was going to say Stuart Little. A Life Backwards? What was it? A Tenet prequel?
That would have been A Life Backwards and also Forwards. No, it was, I think he played an addict.
Right.
And obviously was able to draw from real life experience a little bit.
Of course.
And that's kind of why I like him, because he's lived a life, and he's turned things around.
Yeah.
I think that's such an inspiring story. But yeah, stuff like Bronson, I thought he was fantastic in that. I
never made it all the way through that. Nicholas Winding Refn, isn't it?
Yeah, he's so good. He's so good in it.
Yeah. I remember some of his scenes where he's addressing the camera, and just his presence was very gripping.
Yeah.
But
he's a maniac in that movie.
Yeah. I'm not sure the reason I didn't finish that. It's maybe just young and stupid.
Maybe. Give it another go.
Yeah, I should do, definitely.
But yeah, he is good. Did he play Eames?
Eames, yeah.
Eames, yeah. Which the only reason I know that name is because of the famous Eames chair.
Who this character was inspired by?
Yeah, and I didn't realise, obviously, it was a married couple.
Ray and Charles, I want to say.
Yes.
Yeah. Designers.
Yeah. But also architects.
Interesting.
Yeah, well, a lot of the names were definitely pretty intentional because Dom kind of comes from the word home.
Domicile.
Domicile, domesticity. But yeah, it's a Slavic word.
Okay.
Meaning home. Ariadne is also a really obvious one if you know anything about Greek mythology.
Yeah.
And I mean, Greek mythology is kind of rife with stuff about dreams as well.
Is it?
To take it back to the Matrix, the god of dreams was Morpheus.
Ooh, okay.
So absolutely rife with that sort of stuff. But
we're gonna have to put a pin in a lot of this research so that I can look into it for our rap show.
Yeah. But yeah, Ariadne was obviously the daughter of King Minos? Okay. I don't know. It's the story of the Minotaur, which I loved when I was a kid.
Is that the horse guy?
I don't think it was a horse. I think he had a bull's head.
Bull's head?
Bull.
Oh, bull.
Yeah.
Right. All right. Okay. Not like a Frank situation. Frank Cyborg.
Did you think I said a bull's head?
Yeah.
Just a giant pair of testicles on legs.
Yeah. Sounds like an Alex Winter movie. I'd watch it. You probably own it.
Yeah, I probably would watch it as well. But yeah, so King Minos, his daughter was called Ariadne, who was apparently married to Theseus, who was in the famous labyrinth, and she assisted his escape.
Right.
Kind of with the whole dropping breadcrumbs to find your way back out, and like the string. And I did read. That's the extent that I could find linked to this movie. But when I was reading about that specific story, in some retellings of it, in some different versions, there is also an addition that says that she later married Dionysus, and then she died, and then he had to travel to the underworld to bring her back.
Yeah, okay.
Which is equally linked to the themes of this movie.
Yeah.
I didn't find that mentioned anywhere linked to Inception, but it's like reading that version, it's hard not to draw parallels to that as well.
Yeah. And I don't think any of this is necessary by mistake, apart from the Marion Cotillard having played Edith Piaf. I think a lot of this is probably planned and like just thought about to the nth degree, which I love. And the choice of names is so important when you're trying to tell a movie like this, show a movie like this. I think maybe not on face value, but like it does make you think about it a bit more and go into
adds
these
a
and
richness.
try and put yourself in the perspective of the filmmaker. What were they thinking by choosing this name, and what were they researching, and how was this influenced by that? As people that adore filmmaking and films in general, it is, no matter what you think about Nolan's movies, I don't love Tenet, but I'm sure we could talk for an hour and a half on Tenet. No problem.
Yeah, easily.
And that's probably the biggest compliment I could pay someone like Nolan.
I hadn't really thought about it in those terms, but you're spot on.
Even when these films don't quite work for me, they're fascinating.
Yeah.
And that's huge. That is huge, I think.
And he always has such talented casts.
Yeah, talented everybody.
So it's quite a difficult question to answer in terms of who was my favourite performance.
Yeah. I think he just gets talented people like all over the place. Even the editor, Lee Smith, who was the editor on RoboCop 2. I mean, one of the greatest sequels ever made.
You heard it here first, folks.
What about, have you got anything else on names?
Not really, no.
Okay. What about then, if you had to put this movie in a universe, in another movie's universe? This movie is a shared universe with something else. Got anything?
Oh my God.
I've got some stuff. Do you want me to give you my examples?
Yeah.
So, a film we spoke about earlier on in the season, Dreamscape, and I've not heard Christopher Nolan cite Dreamscape specifically as a reference point.
But I mean, the people entering other people's dreams.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And more the shared dream of it situation, and there's this magic box that allows you to get into people's dreams.
Oh my God, Christopher Nolan, cast David Patrick Kelly in your next movie, please.
Oh, I would love to see that collaboration.
Right?
And I think that he's actually would be very interesting. Like, he can be quite abstract with his performances, and I think that's sometimes what Nolan's movies are missing. I can't believe I'm saying they're not abstract enough. Tenet's not abstract enough.
Said nobody ever.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh God, David Patrick Kelly. Yes, please.
Right?
Yeah. But I like to think that Inception is a sequel to Dreamscape, because it's the technology that was made popular by Max von Sydow, or developed by him and Dennis Quaid. And then the military took over that equipment, and then it eventually became banned or whatever, and people using it are baddies or whatever. But yeah, so just,
and then they enlisted Lucas Haas.
And then they enlisted
Witness.
Interestingly,
oh God, go on.
This was going to be my other example. This could be a shared universe with Witness.
How?
So, right, my thoughts are Samuel Lapp, which is Lucas Haas's character
of course.
in Witness.
Yeah.
Samuel Lapp went on to live for just another 3 months, sadly, before he fell into a wood chipper. And then when that happened, he died and he woke up. And he was in the Inception universe.
And he was in the Pussy Posse.
He was in the Pussy Posse. Yeah. And then someone stabbed him for being in the Pussy Posse. And then he woke up again and realised he was in the Inception universe. And his name was Nash, and he was a 39-year-old man helping to inceptionize people. And grassing up Leonardo DiCaprio and his team to Ken Watanabe.
Dirty scoundrel. What a grass.
If Ken Watanabe is asking me questions, I'm being fucking honest to Ken Watanabe.
I guess, yeah.
I'm not fucking with that guy.
You've got a point there.
Yeah. Yeah. So Dreamscape and Witness. This is a sequel to both of those movies.
It's not what I anticipated that you would say, but I shouldn't be surprised.
You didn't think I was going to bring up Witness?
We already brought it up. Twice is too many times.
Oh, dear me. Dear me. Final thoughts?
Final thoughts are much the same as they were when we started this episode. I think Christopher Nolan is ultimately an incredibly talented director, filmmaker, / writer, dreamweaver, visionary.
Another very English reference there.
I think he's excellent at what he does.
Yeah,
I just don't think a lot of his films are necessarily for my tastes.
Yeah, that's fair. And similarly, like, as I've gotten older, I'm becoming less connected with these films, I think. And I don't know if that's as a result of me aging out of them, or it's a result of him just changing what he's doing slightly.
Maybe.
But I admire this film, massively. I think it's a very, very interesting movie, and it's so ambitious, and it nails mostly everything, I would say.
And it's such a cultural touchstone as well. Like,
yeah.
You see films like Psycho and The Shining being referenced and homaged so many times, all over the shop, and Inception's kind of been added to that list.
Well, Kubrick is again a huge influence to Nolan.
Yeah, you can see that.
The spinning set specifically, I think he got the ideas, or certainly was pulling from 2001.
Yeah,
and things that happen in that, and the spinning space station and stuff. So you can see the influences all over it. And I think just to have a blockbuster with this idea, I love it. Like, and I want that to continue forever, regardless of whether I enjoy his movies or not.
Yeah, of course.
I still will go and see every single one, because I know that there's a certain level of craft that's gone into it. Regardless of how I feel, I'm going to go impressive.
I'm glad I've finally seen it. I feel a little bit closer to being a proper human now.
You are more complete now. Yeah.
I feel so. I feel like I might be.
Yeah. Well, I think we're sort of on a similar page then, really. I really enjoyed having this discussion about it. Really enjoyed doing the research for it. I went in depth on this one, more so than any other of this season, I would say.
There's such a wealth of information out there. It's hard to know where to start.
There's so much of it out there. Like, everybody's covered this movie as well. And I've listened to a few podcasts, only a couple. I didn't want to get too much of other people's kind of opinions, but I wanted to absorb as much of the production information as possible. Blank Check went into quite a lot of detail about that. If you want to hear more about the production, I would recommend listening to the Film Stories episode, where he talks about Simon Brute. He talks about Inception in quite some detail. Really interesting way to get a summary of all of the production, if you're interested in that. Maybe I'll link that too, if I remember. Yeah, it just maybe over explains itself a little bit story wise. And I think if I'm rewatching it, as I said, I'm rewatching the last 90 minutes. But as an achievement, as a movie, as a box office cultural touchstone, blockbuster, language, you know, the influence that Nolan has had on movies, for better or for worse. You know, every movie since The Dark Knight has been a gritty superhero movie. And sometimes that works and sometimes that can get pretty tired. But you can't argue that his fingerprints are all over modern filmmaking.
Yeah.
Much like Stanley Kubrick's were. And I think he'll always be talked about in that same kind of vein. And
yeah, for
deservedly
sure.
so.
There's no denying he's one of the greats.
He's a master.
Just stop writing about dead wives, for God's sake.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe the next one will be a dead child.
Mixing it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe.
It's completely different, this story. So, penultimate episode done. Next week, we are moving on to our final episode in my season of movies about dreams. And we're finally getting to an Elm Street movie.
Yay.
And it's not Elm Street 1.
It's not, but we did watch that recently.
We did. I haven't told you yet, but we're going to be watching Elm Street 2 for my next Monday night movie pick before we watch Elm Street 3. Dream Warriors? I almost said Dream Weavers, you bastard. Dreamweavers is number 4. Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors. And I chose that one. No, I'm going to save that. Find out next week to find out why I chose that one and not another Elm Street movie.
Don't tell people now. Don't give them the goods before the episode.
Yeah, no, I'm going to tease them.
Yeah.
You have to tune in next week.